Respect is rarely lost in one dramatic moment. Most of the time, it disappears quietly through small behaviors that you repeat so often that people eventually stop seeing you the way they once did. You can be intelligent, hardworking, generous, and capable, yet still lose respect if your behavior constantly communicates insecurity, desperation, or a lack of standards. And the dangerous part is that most people won't tell you when it's happening. They simply change the way they treat you. They interrupt you more. They stop taking your promises seriously. They become comfortable canceling on you. They stop asking for your opinion. They push your boundaries because they have learned that your boundaries move. They notice that you complain more than you act, explain more than you decide, and promise more than you deliver. Eventually, you may look around and wonder why people don't respect you like they used to. The answer is often hidden in behaviors you thought were harmless. The first is constantly seeking approval. There is nothing wrong with wanting people to like you. Humans are social creatures, and approval matters. The problem begins when approval becomes more important than your own judgment. You start changing your opinions depending on who is in the room. You laugh at things you don't find funny. You agree with decisions you privately disagree with. You become afraid to say no because you imagine the other person becoming disappointed. You ask everyone what they think before making even simple decisions. You constantly need reassurance that you're doing the right thing. And slowly, people notice that your position changes depending on the person standing in front of you. They may not consciously think, this person is insecure, but they feel it. They feel that you're trying to be accepted rather than simply being yourself. And when people sense that you need their approval, your words become less powerful because they know there is a hidden objective underneath them. You're not simply expressing an opinion. You're hoping they approve of it. You're not simply making a decision. You're hoping they confirm that it was the right decision. You're not simply telling someone no. You're watching their face to see whether they are still happy with you. That creates weakness because your emotional state becomes controlled by external reactions. A stronger position is not to stop caring what anyone thinks. That's impossible and unnecessary. The stronger position is to care without becoming controlled. Listen to people. Consider their opinions. Learn from criticism, but make your final decision based on your own principles. You can say, I understand why you see it that way, but I disagree. You can say, I appreciate the advice, but I've decided to do something different. You can hear disappointment without immediately changing your decision. That ability communicates something powerful. You respect other people's opinions without surrendering your own judgment. The second behavior is making promises you don't keep. This one destroys respect faster than most people realize. Every time you tell someone you're going to do something and don't do it, you create a small gap between your words and your identity. One broken promise may be understandable. Everyone makes mistakes. But repeated inconsistency creates a reputation. If you constantly say, I'll call you, and don't. I'll finish it tomorrow, and don't. I'll be there at 8, and arrive late. I'll change, and repeat the same behavior. Eventually, people stop listening to what you say because they've learned to wait for what you actually do. Your words become predictions nobody trusts. And you don't fix this by making bigger promises. You fix it by making fewer promises and keeping them. If you're not sure you can do something, don't announce certainty. Say, I'll try to have it done by Friday. If you know you cannot make it, communicate early. If you make a mistake, admit it instead of inventing excuses. Reliability is not about being perfect. It's about being predictable in the right ways. People should know that when you give your word, you take it seriously. Your reputation is built through these tiny repetitions. That's why respect isn't something you demand. It's something people gradually conclude about you after observing your behavior. The third behavior is explaining yourself constantly. We've talked about this before, but it deserves to be repeated because it is one of the clearest signals of insecurity. When someone questions you, you immediately give a long explanation. When someone disagrees, you defend yourself for 10 minutes. When you make a decision, you provide every detail behind it. When someone is disappointed, you rush to prove that you had good intentions. You think you're creating clarity, but sometimes you're communicating that you are afraid your decision won't stand without their approval. Strong communication is not about saying as much as possible. It's about saying what is necessary. If someone asks why you can't attend, "I already have plans," may be enough. If someone asks why you made a decision, explain it if the situation genuinely requires explanation. But don't turn every decision into a courtroom where you have to prove your innocence. The more you defend yourself unnecessarily, the more material you give people to challenge. You say one reason, they challenge it. You provide another, they challenge that. You provide a third, and now you're negotiating against yourself. Eventually, you aren't communicating anymore. You're begging the other person to approve your choice. There's enormous power in being able to say, "That's my decision," not aggressively, not arrogantly, simply calmly. The fourth behavior is tolerating disrespect and then complaining about it later. This is one of the most damaging patterns because it teaches people that your boundaries are not real. Someone repeatedly speaks to you disrespectfully. You say nothing. Someone cancels on you repeatedly. You accept it. Someone only contacts you when they need something. You remain available. Someone constantly crosses a boundary. You give them another chance. Then, weeks or months later, you become resentful. You tell your friends, "They don't respect me." But here's the difficult question. What behavior have you been rewarding? If every time someone crosses your boundary, you remain in exactly the same position, you have taught them that the boundary has no consequence. A boundary isn't speech. A boundary is a decision about what you will do when a certain behavior occurs. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, you don't necessarily need a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes you simply reduce access. You stop participating in conversations that become disrespectful. You leave the situation. You reconsider the relationship. You don't need to threaten people with consequences. You simply follow through with your own choices. This is why calm boundaries are more powerful than emotional warnings. Anyone can say, "If you ever do that again, I'm done with you." But if they remain every time, the threat loses meaning. Quiet consistency is stronger. When people discover that your boundaries are connected to your actions, they begin taking them seriously. The fifth behavior is talking about your plans more than you work on them. There is something psychologically satisfying about telling people what you're going to accomplish. You announce the business you're going to build. You talk about the body you're going to create. You tell everyone about the project you're starting. You explain the book you're going to write. You describe the person you're going to become. And because people react positively, you receive a small emotional reward before you've done the work. The danger is that talking can start replacing action. You feel productive because you've discussed productivity. You feel ambitious because you've described your ambitions. But eventually, people compare your words with your results. If every month you announce a new plan, but nothing changes, your ambition becomes entertainment. People stop taking your goals seriously because you've trained them to expect announcements instead of results. This is why some goals are better kept private until they have substance behind them. You don't need to tell everyone what you're building. Build it. Let the result introduce itself. There's a different kind of confidence that comes from having evidence instead of promises. You don't have to say you're disciplined when your life demonstrates discipline. You don't have to tell people you're successful when the results are visible. You don't have to announce that you're changing when your behavior has already changed. Silence during the building phase isn't weakness. It protects your focus. And when the result finally appears, you don't need to explain how hard you worked. The result is the explanation. The sixth behavior is being emotionally reactive. People don't respect you because you never feel emotions. They respect you because your emotions don't automatically control your behavior. There's a huge difference. Anger is normal. Disappointment is normal. Jealousy is normal. Fear is normal. What matters is what you do with those emotions. If someone says something you don't like and you immediately explode, people learn that your buttons are easy to press. If someone ignores you and you send an angry paragraph, they learn that distance controls you. If someone criticizes you and you spend the entire night trying to prove them wrong, they learn that your ego is easily activated. Emotional control doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means creating space between the feeling and the response. Someone provokes you. You pause. Someone insults you. You decide whether responding is worth your energy. Someone criticizes your work. You separate useful information from unnecessary hostility. Someone rejects you. You allow yourself to feel the disappointment without turning it into humiliation or revenge. That pause is power, because the person who can make you react on command has a certain degree of control over you. If your anger can be summoned by a sentence, your anger is not protecting you. It's controlling you. This is why calm people can appear more powerful even when they aren't saying much. They aren't necessarily stronger physically or more intelligent. They simply don't give everyone immediate access to their nervous system. They choose their responses. And the seventh behavior is chasing people who have already shown you they don't value your presence. This is perhaps the most obvious way to lose respect, yet people repeat it constantly. Someone becomes distant, and you pursue them. They stop responding, and you send another message. They cancel repeatedly, and you keep making plans. They clearly show low interest, and you try harder. You believe that more effort will eventually change their behavior. But attention cannot manufacture genuine interest. You cannot chase someone into respecting you. You cannot give enough attention to force someone to appreciate you. And every time you continue pursuing someone who is clearly withdrawn, you communicate that their lack of effort doesn't matter because you will provide enough effort for both people. That's not love. That's imbalance. If someone wants to be in your life, give them the opportunity to demonstrate it. Don't carry the entire relationship alone. Let effort be mutual. Let people choose you without being dragged toward the choice. This applies to friendships, relationships, business partnerships, and even professional connections. Stop measuring your worth by how hard you can work to keep someone who is already halfway out the door. Sometimes walking away isn't about making them miss you. It's about refusing to abandon yourself for someone else's attention. And here's where all 7 behaviors connect. Seeking approval, breaking promises, over-explaining, tolerating disrespect, constantly announcing your plans, reacting emotionally, and chasing people all have the same underlying problem. You are allowing external reactions to determine your internal position. You're constantly adjusting yourself based on what other people might think, say, or do. And when people sense that, they realize they can influence you. Maybe not consciously. Maybe they aren't trying to manipulate you. But the dynamic exists. If your decision changes when someone gets angry, anger becomes influential. If your boundary disappears when someone becomes disappointed, disappointment becomes influential. If you chase when someone withdraws, withdrawal becomes influential. If you over-explain whenever someone questions you, questioning becomes influential. The solution isn't to become cold, arrogant, or impossible to reach. The solution is to become internally anchored. Know what you value. Know what you will tolerate. Know what you're building. Know what you're willing to lose. Know when you've made a mistake and can admit it. Know when criticism is useful and when it is simply noise. Know when a relationship deserves more effort and when you're the only person keeping it alive. Once you know those things, your behavior becomes much simpler. You don't need to constantly perform strength. You just stop behaving in ways that contradict it. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop promising things you won't do. You stop explaining decisions that don't require explanations. You stop tolerating behavior that repeatedly violates your standards. You stop announcing every plan before you've done the work. You stop allowing anger to dictate your actions. And you stop chasing people who have already demonstrated that they don't want to meet you halfway. That's when people begin noticing something different about you. Not because you demanded respect, but because your behavior became harder to dismiss. Your word started meaning something. Your time became structured. Your reactions became controlled. Your boundaries became consistent. Your attention became intentional. Your actions began matching your claims. And when words and actions finally align, you don't need to convince people that you're confident. They can see it. If you want to develop this mindset further, the Dark Mind Protocol is built around exactly these principles: emotional control, psychological awareness, strategic communication, boundaries, self-respect, and understanding human behavior without becoming dependent on manipulation. The full protocol and additional resources are available through the link in the description and pinned comment. But you don't need a product, a book, or another video to start changing. You can begin with one decision tonight. Identify the behavior that is costing you the most respect and stop rewarding it. Maybe you need to stop explaining. Maybe you need to stop chasing. Maybe you need to become more reliable. Maybe you need to finally enforce a boundary you've been talking about for months. Maybe you need to stop telling everyone what you're going to do and simply start doing it. Whatever it is, don't announce the transformation. Practice it, because respect doesn't return when you tell people that you're changing. It returns when they repeatedly experience the new version of your behavior. And eventually, you may notice something even more important. You don't care as much about whether everyone respects you anymore. You care about whether you respect yourself. That's the foundation. If you have to betray your values to be liked, the approval isn't worth much. If you have to abandon your boundaries to keep someone, the relationship isn't balanced. If you have to pretend to be someone else to maintain someone's respect, you aren't actually being respected. Real respect begins when your behavior becomes consistent with your standards. You don't need to dominate people. You don't need to intimidate them. You don't need to become ruthless. You need to become reliable, composed, selective, and honest with yourself. Because the strongest presence in any room isn't always the loudest person. Sometimes it's the person who doesn't need to prove anything. The person who listens before reacting. The person who keeps his word. The person who can say no without guilt. The person who can walk away without revenge. The person who can admit when he's wrong without feeling destroyed. The person who doesn't chase approval because he already has standards for himself. And if you remember only one thing from this video, remember this. People don't lose respect for you because you're too kind. They lose respect when your kindness has no boundaries, your words have no consistency, your emotions control your behavior, and your standards disappear whenever someone pushes against them. Be kind, but be clear. Be generous, but be selective. Be confident, but stay teachable. Be available, but don't abandon your priorities. Love people, but don't lose yourself trying to keep them. And above everything else, make your actions so consistent that you no longer need to explain who you are. Let your behavior answer the question for you.